Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC, and it's time for the full review of the Hobao Hyper TT 2.0. So this is a 110 scale electric four-wheel drive race truggy, and kind of unusual because there are not a whole lot of 110 scale four-wheel drive truggies out there, at least race truggies. I did have the 1.0, that was the very first video I made on the channel. Also had the Techno ET410. Other things are going to be like the X-Ray XT4, which I have not driven, but so I'm familiar with that. I do have the buggy version, the XB4. So yeah, this is kind of an unusual class, not a lot of offerings in the 110 scale race class. But yeah, we're going to be doing the full review. The way the video works is we go through 6 different categories, giving a rating from 1 to 5 stars as compared to those other vehicles. So if it's an above average rating, it's going to get over 3 stars. If it's an average rating, it's going to get 3 stars. If it's a below average rating, it's obviously going to get below 3 stars. So that's the way the review works, and yeah, let's get into it. Electronics is a little bit hard for me to evaluate because this is the only one that comes as an RTR. Every other four-wheel drive truggy out there that I know of comes as a race kit. So the XT4 comes as a race kit, the Techno ET410 comes as a race kit. I think there are some offerings from smaller brands. You know, maybe you could consider the Red Cat Valkyrie TR as a 10 scale truggy, but to me it's a totally different type of vehicle in this. That's not a race truggy. This definitely is. But race truggies, you know, as you might expect, don't really come with electronics, but this one you can get. So here's the radio, the XB or the HB 2.4 gigahertz V2. Actually not a bad radio, a lot better than I remembered. I have tried this on the Hobao Hyper VS2. I didn't think it was that great as a nitro radio, but for, you know, an RTR electronic or electric vehicle radio, it's actually not that bad. Motor is not particularly fast. It is 3900 kV, so I would say it's really a 2S size motor. If you want to run 3S, I would go down to probably a lower kV, more like a 3000, 3300 kV, a little bit high kV for 3S to me. So I don't consider this to be really a 3S vehicle. The ESC, again, is rated only up to 3000 kV on 3S. You are supposed to run it on 2S, anything higher than that. So I've been running this only on 2S because that's what it's spec'd out for. The servo, not particularly fast, or, you know, it is reasonably strong actually, so I think it's got a decent amount of torque, but for small little truggy like that, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, everything kind of just works fine, but it's hard for me to give it a rating because there's no other RTR truggy like this out there. So if I had to give it a rating, I'd say it's pretty typical for, you know, something in this like $400 class, 10 scale, you know, four-wheel drive type of thing. I'd give it like a 3-star rating, but, you know, since there's nothing out there, it's hard for me to really say what the rating is. So this does come in 2 versions, a ready to run like we have here, which has everything, glued tires, body, painted everything, all the electronics. Also comes in a almost ready to run, which you will have to glue up the tires and paint the body, I believe, but it does not have the electronics in. Obviously sells for quite a bit cheaper. The RTR is $400 here at the time of this video. The almost ready to run is, I think, $276 at the time of this video. So depending on which option you want, whether you want the roller or whether you want the RTR, there are a couple different offerings. Looking at the truck, a little bit different. It is a race truck in my opinion. You know, there's some debate, is this a race truck, is it a basher? I would say it's, you know, kind of an 80% race truck, 20% basher. Designed much more for racing in my opinion. It's got the aluminum chassis, all the adjustments, sway bars, different shock mounting positions, different Ackerman positions, aluminum shocks. Very nice truck overall. Shows a little bit of a, you know, nitro powered roots. For those of you unfamiliar with Hobao, they do make a lot of nitro cars. They do make a lot of electric cars. The 1.0 originally came in both versions, so you could get nitro or electric, but with the 2.0, it is electric only, but you still kind of see some nitro-ishness to this, in my opinion, just like the aluminum chassis. You know, the pivot ball suspension is much more of a, you know, A-scale nitro type thing. So the design elements of this thing still are somewhat similar to the 1.0. Definitely, you can tell it's an evolution of that as opposed to a redesign. Truck overall though, I do like the design. I think it's pretty good. Compared to another race truck, it's maybe not got quite as much stuff. It does have adjustable pills, does have adjustable turnbuckles, does have adjustable caster here on the upper links. So it does have all the race adjustments, but you know, it's still a little bit basher-ish. You know, not 100% race in my opinion. Turnbuckles look a little thin, but it is pretty well equipped overall. Certainly at its price, I think it's a really good value. Adjustable shocks, adjustable, you know, different springs that they sell. So definitely has everything that you want to need. They do have provisions for inserts onto the upper arms and lower arms, front and rear, so you can add additional stiffness to it. So definitely is quite tunable. In design category, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. It is super beefy. I think they made it a little bit more for durability than full-on lightness or whatever. Full-on raciness. The diff cases do split, I think, vertically, so they're a little bit more difficult to get at. You do have to kind of pop them out, kind of old school in that manner. So in the design category, I'm gonna get 3 stars. The only thing I would say I probably don't like is seems to be a ton of bump steer here on the front steering links. So they do come out at an angle. So you know, as the suspension compresses, it just kind of toe in and toe out a bit. But other than that, yeah, I do like the design. I think it's pretty good. 3 stars. I took the Hyper TT 2.0 to a few different locations. I did run it on dirt. I want to see how it performed in loose traction surfaces. I want to see how it performed on jumps. I actually drove quite well. It shocked me with how good it was. These tires, I thought, as I remembered from the 1.0, they didn't really hook up all that well, but in the dirt with the really soft films, the spikes, they actually had tons of traction. They kind of felt like Velcro in the dirt. I also took it out to a carpet track. I want to see how it performed as a race vehicle. And again, these tires have tons of traction. You know, the truck nosedives a little bit, but pretty much every truggy I've had of this class does nosedive a bit, so that's pretty standard. But tons of traction, had tons of steering as well, so that's the other part that shocked me. The 1.0 was very lazy. It had almost no turning radius. It was very difficult to drive on a tight indoor type surface. This one, they've corrected it. They did redesign the whole steering rack, different Ackerman bars, everything. Does have tons of traction, does have tons of steering. I even reduced the toe in the rear, kind of remove some of the toe in, remove some of the anti-squat to get drive a little better, and it performed quite well. So yeah, steering wise, handling wise, I think this is actually really good. Electronics are not super fast. It's hard for me to rate electronics as opposed to other vehicles because this is the only one that comes as an RTR. So, electronics wise, I don't think it's particularly fast. It is a 3900 kV motor. This ESC is capable of 3S, but you're supposed to be running a 3000 or lower kV motor, so I only ran it on 2S. To me, this motor is really designed to run on 2S. You want to drop the kV if you want to run it on 3S, but for racing, it's all 2S only, so that didn't really concern me. But yeah, in the performance category, I think it's actually pretty good. Compared to those other vehicles, tons of traction, a lot of steering, especially coming to the 1.0. This is a huge improvement. The 1.0, performance-wise, I'd probably give it like a 1 or 2 star rating, but this I'm going to actually give it an above average rating, 4 stars. It's much, much better. I can't overstate, how much better this was better than the 1.0 in terms of how it actually drives. Very, very impressed. Now, durability is a funny category because I'm not comparing this to any other vehicle. I'm not comparing it to an 8-scale buggy. I'm not comparing it to a 110 scale monster truck. I'm not comparing it to a 2-wheel drive race buggy. I'm comparing this to other 110 scale 4-wheel drive truggies. And to me, this is the most durable. I had a lot of issues with the 1.0. I definitely broke a lot of stuff, the hubs, the upper hinge pin brace here, even some of the arms and stuff. So yeah, the 1.0, I had a lot of issues. Actually ended up boiling the arms, ended up boiling the hubs, running some aluminum pieces. This thing, I have not broken anything yet. Now, I definitely have not driven this as much as the other vehicles, but so far this has held up beautifully in terms of durability. I do think you could probably break some things. The turnbuckles look kind of thin to me. The steering hubs I'm not 100% confident in yet, but they haven't broken it, and you can get aluminum parts or swap out the turnbuckles obviously if you wanted to. But compared to the ET410, which I had a habit of basically bending a hinge pin brace every single time I drove that thing or breaking an arm, the XT4 is well known for breaking arms. It's just got very long arms. Overall, 110 scale 4-wheel drive truggy is probably the most fragile class in my opinion. You got really long arms, you got a lot of traction, you got a lot of acceleration with this type of vehicle. The wheels and tires are very big, very heavy for the scale of vehicles. So again, truggy in my opinion is probably the most fragile class in the 110 scale race arena. But to me, this is the most durable. I'm not going to say this is the most durable RC car out there, But for a 110 scale four-wheel drive truggy, which is how the ratings work, I think this is best in class. I think this is the most durable truggy you can buy in this 110 scale size. So I'm going to get 5 stars in durability. Really one of the advantages of this. The original one I would have given like a 1-star rating. This is probably the most fragile RC car I've ever owned. But the 2.0 is probably the most durable 110 scale four-wheel drive truggy you can get. So I'm going to give it 5 stars in the durability category. Hobao is definitely a smaller brand here in the US, but Techno, again, is also not a particularly big brand. X-Ray in the US is not a particularly big brand. So among all those other brands, this has actually got, you know, a decent amount of support. They do have Hobao USA, which is where I buy all the parts. Your local hobby shop, not likely to carry a whole lot of parts. Some hobby shops do carry Hobao, but for the most part, they're not. Working on this thing, yeah, a little bit more difficult. The diffs are definitely a little bit more difficult to get to. You do have to split the diff case. You do have to kind of lift it up out of the chassis. It's not bad, not great. I think it's kind of typical, kind of average. So for support and maintenance, I'm going to give it an average rating. I think it's about 3 stars. It's not as big as like a major brand like Team Associated. It's not as small as some of those sort of cheap Chinese brands that you only have to buy from Amazon. So Hobao, I think, is kind of in the middle. Support-wise, maintenance-wise, you know, it's kind of typical. So I'm going to give it 3 stars in the support and maintenance category. The Hyper TT 2.0 sells for $400 for the ready to run, $276 for the almost ready to run, where you have to provide your own electronics. That's actually an amazing value, because if you look at the other race truggies out there, the X-Ray sells for $600 just for the kit alone. You know, you have to build it yourself. You do have to buy tires, I think wheels as well. Again, with the Techno ET410, that is $450 just for the kit. Again, you have to buy the wheels and tires. You have to buy all the electronics. This is $400 for a ready to run, or if you want the almost ready to run, it's $276. So you're getting like this thing for hundreds of dollars less than the other brands. So in that, you know, category, I have to give it 5 stars because this is the best value. I think it's actually pretty well equipped. The aluminum is actually really nice. Big improvement over the 1.0. I think the shock towers, the chassis, everything seems beefier, nicer than before. The hinge pin braces look a lot nicer. The shocks look a lot nicer. You know, it even has kind of the aluminum shock caps with the plastic insert. So overall, as an RTR, $400, it's an amazing value. As a almost ready to run for $276, it's an amazing value. So 5 stars in the value category. That is, again, one of the strong points of Hobao, and then one of the strong points of the Hyper TT 2.0. So my final thoughts on the Hobao Hyper TT 2.0 is this is actually a pretty massive improvement over the 1.0. The 1.0 was the very first truck I did on the channel, the very first video I ever made, so I'm very familiar with that. Made a lot of videos. I liked it a lot. I thought it had a lot of shortcomings, and they seem to have addressed every concern I ever had. So all the durability things that I had problems with the 1.0, the upper hinge pin brace, the arms, the steering hubs, the rear arms, even the shock towers I did bend, I believe, on the 1.0. So all those things have been addressed. Then the design stuff, again, they address. So they redesigned the steering rack. It's got the redesigned Ackerman, way more steering. They have the lay down battery here. They've got the space for the ESC because they moved the rear center diff all the way to the back. So all those basically design elements that I had issues with the 1.0, again, they addressed. And then the performance thing. This thing has a lot of steering. The old one barely turned at all, in my opinion. A lot of it was just due to the Ackerman and the steering throw and stuff like that. Adjustable pills, again, the old one had way too much rear toe. This one has adjustable toe. I actually reduced it a little bit. I reduced the anti-squat a little bit. So tons of tuning adjustments, ton of design improvements, tons of durability improvements. This is a massive step forward. So that's kind of what I feel like about the Hyper TT 2.0. Now, is this the most competitive race truggy out there? I don't really know. To be honest with you, I did have the ET410, raced it a little bit. I think that had some good points. They were a little bit different style of vehicle. That one was a little bit more point and shoot, in my opinion. That one you kind of had to get it on the brakes, get it on these big beefy tires, turn it, you could rip it out. This one is a little bit more fluid, in my opinion. part of it I think is just due to the big massive battery. So you can run a long pack, you can run a shorty, you do have a lot of options in getting weight distribution, so you can make it a little bit more even, in my opinion. Like, I did move the battery towards the rear. I do tend to run the full size stick pack. That makes it just a little bit more balanced in my opinion, but certainly all these race trucks you can tune a little bit. So yeah, Hyper TT 2.0, really glad to have gotten a chance to drive this. Now as a basher, you know, I don't think it's as bash worthy as, say, a four-wheel drive monster truck. That's going to be much more of something you just launch and do triple backflips. This thing on 2S, probably you can't backflip it maybe with the right tires, but kind of out of the box, I would say it's not really a backflipping machine. Durability wise, again, I think it's more race oriented, and so it's not going to be as durable as like a 100% basher. To me, this is more like 80% race truck, 20% basher, and that's kind of where I think it fits. But it's good on all surfaces, which is again the part that shocked me. It drives a lot better in dirt than I was expecting, and these tires are actually one of the stickiest or grippiest tires I've ever had on my local BMX park. In these like hot, dusty, dry conditions, they hooked up really well. A lot of vehicles I've been driving there lately actually have no traction, so that shocked me about this. The foams, whatever they did, I don't know. But yeah, overall, those are my thoughts on the Hyper TT 2.0. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Look for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.